Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Adventure Stories. This is our new podcast that is focusing in on just telling the stories of people in our church and how they met Jesus and how their lives have changed as a result of that, and just the honest conversation about the real struggle that is life. And how we tackle some of those things. Today, we're continuing to kind of focus in on people that have unique perspectives in this coronavirus landscape that we're living in, this upside down reality that we're currently living in. And today we're going to talk with Bridget Morgan. And Bridget and her family, her husband Justin and their daughter Cora, they joined the church in December. And they have a really unique perspective. One, because Justin is a pediatrician, and similar to last week when we talked to Chase, Justin's on the front line of this coronavirus deal and handling this and dealing with this from a healthcare perspective. But Bridget is a licensed marriage and family therapist, which means she's got a unique perspective and a unique insight on how we as parents and families and husbands and wives in our marriages, how we can in this season not just survive, but even maybe potentially, if you can believe it or not, thrive in coronavirus reality. And so today, this is going to be a two-part episode. Part one today is going to focus more in on the issues that happen in families, especially where there are younger kids. And the issues that we may face with our kids of how do we talk to our kids about this? What's going on in their heads? What do we not know about them? Those kinds of things. The next part, which is going to premiere next week, part two, which will come out on Tuesday of next week, is going to focus more in on us as adults, maybe adults who are single or kind of riding this thing out alone, in isolation, feels that way. Even those of us, maybe parents or families that have older kids, grown kids that may even be out of the house because we never really stopped parenting. So how do we parent our grown kids and extended family in this kind of a season? And so I hope you enjoy part one of our conversation today when it comes to thriving as families in the coronavirus reality. All right, hey, welcome everybody to another edition of, or our second edition of Adventure Stories. And this is a podcast where we are just catching up with some folks that go to adventure, hearing their story, but also in this case, speaking into just some of the things we can be doing in this time to be good neighbors, to be good people, to just consider, some of those other than ourselves, what's going on in the world, and then just shed some insight into, how we can not just survive, but thrive in a really, really strange time. And today I'm with Bridget Morgan. Hey, Bridget.
Hi.
I wanted you give us just kind of a quick rundown of how you and Justin and Cora came to find adventure and all that kind of stuff. Because I'm sure a lot of people now are going, hey, I've seen her before. She sang at Christmas and I've seen her sing, so now we're going to, faces and names and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, why don't you give us that story of just how you all came to be part of the Adventure fam?
Sure. Well, we're here mainly because of you and Christy. We've been in small group with you guys for, I think it's been almost 5 years, which it's a really long time. And then when you were exploring the idea of moving on to be a lead pastor somewhere, we wanted to be supportive. And so I remember the first one that we went to when you were at Adventure in September. We sat through that first time and we had never heard you preach before, because you're mainly in student ministry at Southeast. And I remember getting in the car and Justin was like, he's really good. I'm like, yeah, he is really good. Not that we were surprised, but we just hadn't experienced it yet. The other thing that really stuck out to us is we liked the community there. Everyone was just so friendly. And after the first time Cora, I think it was our second visit, Cora went to children's church and she got in the car after church and she said, Mommy, I want to go to church here. And so that kind of spoke really loudly to us that she felt comfortable. We were really enjoying it. And we just wanted to jump in and be a part of the church. So we joined in December and we've just been a part of it ever since. We did the new member class and just finding ways to get ourselves plugged in.
That's awesome. Yeah. And, I like to set expectations really low, right? So that when they're like, hey man, there is something to this. Like that was good. So what you're saying is my strategy works really well. Set the bar low and then, do your best to exceed. That's good. And it's good to know too, after 5 years of being in small group, that you're not, you still want to hang out with us.
Yeah, we're not sick of you.
That's good. That's good. So I know you've got a unique perspective on this whole coronavirus thing. One, because your husband Justin is a pediatrician, and so he's been on the front lines. And we talked last week to Chase McDonald, who is an ICU nurse in Norton Healthcare System, and so she's got a frontline view in all this. But in addition to that, you are a licensed marriage and family therapist, and so
Yes.
I'm sure that as you're watching all of this and hearing all the stories and as you look at people's social media, you've got moms, dads pulling their hair out, trying to now homeschool kids and those kinds of things. And you also are doing the same thing, right? So the first question that we kind of wanted to talk about was, how can we talk to our kids about what's going on in the world right now? Whether they're hearing things on the news, or they see mom and dad talking, looking on their phones, looking at curves and spikes and case numbers and death numbers. I mean, these are things that aren't typically common in the world of kids, and they're hearing these things, they're seeing these things. So how do we talk to our kids about what's going on in the world right now?
I jotted down a couple of notes here that I'm going to run through. I don't have the answers to it all, but I also have a 7-year-old in my house, and she has a lot of questions, and I'll share a little bit about that in a minute. But I think the number one thing is for us as parents and caregivers to be aware of our own reactions and our own fears. Kids pick up on our anxiety, and a lot of times they adopt it. So sometimes we might do something, we're like, oh man, that's so my mom would totally do that, and we just kind of adopt those things from our parents. So I think for us as caregivers to be really aware of our own anxiety, our own fears, and how we're putting that on our kids. Kids pick up on our verbal and nonverbal cues, and so we just want to be aware of that. I'm not saying that we're going to be able to hide it all the time, because it's okay to not be okay, but just be aware that we will influence our kids in that way. The other thing is limit social media and media in general. That's a huge thing. Some people have the TV on in the background, and kids are milling around and they're hearing it. They're hearing all of it. And I'm saying limit media, not just for kids, but for us too, because it can be really depressing. If you're on social media and you're scrolling, you see lots of information. A lot of it is misinformation. And so it's not even accurate. And so our anxiety goes up every time we read, multiple things. And so we just want to limit that. In our house, that looks like we watch Andy Brashear at 5:00.
Oh yeah.
We watch him, and we get all the information we need from that. That's not something that Cora watches with us. I know sometimes he has kid-friendly segments, and I appreciate that. So he will have a kid-friendly portion of it, and then he'll allow time for kids to kind of go away. We try to watch it after Cora has gone to bed. So we will watch him, and then we normally will try to find one other thing, like if Dr. Fauci has given any facts. We will try to find one other thing, but we do not listen to political pundits. We really try to limit all of that and keep it with the facts. So just try to limit media, and then give facts that are age appropriate. So we also want, whenever your kid comes to you with a question, express appreciation for the kid even asking you the question. So maybe something like, thank you for coming to me with that question. I like to know what you're wondering about. So you're really thanking them for being transparent with you and having a conversation with you. The next thing let's talk about is validating their emotions. So listen to their fears, listen to their concerns, offer empathy and understanding, but we also have to help them have a realistic reframe of some of those fears and provide age-appropriate facts. And so an example of that is last night I got in bed, I was laying with Cora, getting her ready for bed, and we were just chatting. And then all of a sudden she had all of these questions about coronavirus. She had all the questions, and it was super ironic because I was here to talk to you about that today. But when she was at school, all the kids in her classroom had told her that if you got coronavirus, you were going to die. Like everybody that got the coronavirus died. And so she had been carrying that for how many weeks now? This is what, week 4 or so that
I don't even know anymore.
what day is it?
Yeah. It's, yeah, I don't even know.
And so she's been carrying that. She thought that everybody that got the coronavirus died. And particularly grandparents. And so it was a really great conversation last night for me to sit down with her and to say, COVID-19 or coronavirus is a new virus that's making people sick in a lot of parts of the world, but not everybody that gets it dies. And so I answered her question. It was very limited. I just said, not everybody dies that gets coronavirus. Actually, most people that get it, they're just sick and then they get over it. Some people do die, but most people do not. And honestly, that's all she needed. She did not need any more details. And so I think sometimes we give kids too many details. So I would try to figure out what questions they have and then let that guide the conversation.
I need to stop breaking out the Philadelphia St. Louis
Yes,
map
flow charts. No flow
Right.
charts. No.
I really, I've been trying to make sure my kids understand that there are right ways to do this and wrong ways to do this. And
right, exactly.
guys, this is what happened in Philadelphia in the Spanish flu in
Philadelphia.
We want to be St. Louis. And they don't quite understand that, but that's good. That's good for me to know. That's good to know. That's good.
Yeah, so just limit it. Ask them what questions they have and then answer that question very basically. And sometimes like for a young kid, so very young, like preschool or young elementary, just saying things like, here, I wrote this down. They might just need to hear, some people have been getting sick, so we're being extra careful to stay healthy. And we do that by washing our hands and being practicing social distancing. And then you talk about what that is, and that's it. Older kids might have more questions, and that's okay to get into, but just try to keep it age appropriate.
Yeah. Well, I like that response too, of like, coronavirus is a new virus that makes people sick in different parts of the world, including here. I mean, I think that like those are the kinds of, because I know for me, even I wrestle with I want to understand this more, right? And so sometimes I kind of project some of my questions, onto my 5 and 7-year-old, and they're going, wait, we didn't ask about that. We didn't ask about we didn't even think about when things are going to return to normal, or
I got more things to worry about.
Or the fact that the thing that's I think most often said in our house is there will not be any going back. There will be some kind of a new normal. And they're like, wait, what does that mean? And that's the kind of stuff that I think, like you're saying, probably overwhelms them at that point. And they're going, well, what do you mean? Like everything's going to change. What does that mean? Everything's going to change. Yeah. Parent fail.
There's one more thing, just the importance of maintaining routine. And I know that might sound silly, but for kids, they really need that routine, especially during this time. And so keeping a schedule, I'm sure everybody's doing online school or whatever that looks like in your household. If you have little itty bitties, just some type of skeleton schedule of, how you make your day predictable, because kids right now are feeling a lot of, they don't feel control over hardly anything in their life. And as an adult, I feel a lack of control over my own life. And I don't like the way that feels, and kids don't like the way that feels either. And so figuring out a way that we can make things predictable and a routine and schedule can really help kids with that.
So on that note, though, when you think about, us as parents and families, we, especially those of us that maybe don't traditionally homeschool our kids, we're used to kids go to school, then we go to work, or we have the day or the ability to kind of fill our own schedules. Now we're all together, right? We've been thrust all together. And at first, at least I know, there was some parts of us in our family where we were going, well, this is kind of nice. When was the last time that we had dinner together? When was the last time that we had an opportunity to take walks in our neighborhood? Like, we didn't do that much. And the novelty of that wore off in about 5 minutes, and then it turns into like, so nerves are frayed, tempers are short. How can we do this? Like, how can we do this? How can we, like we talked about earlier, thrive in a situation like this instead of just trying to get through it and survive?
Yeah, I think it's important for parents to really prioritize their own mental health. That can look like a couple of things. It is completely okay to not be okay right now. Nobody's doing it perfectly ever. Like, even if on social media it looks like they're doing it perfectly, this is really hard. Like, for everyone, it's very difficult to maintain this balance. But we have to prioritize our own mental health. It's okay to not be okay, but we still are in charge of our decisions, the things that we say to our kids, and our attitudes in our households. It's really important, if you're feeling frustrated, angry, overwhelmed, to take a break. Like, a lot of times people send their kids to timeout, but oftentimes as a parent, I need a timeout.
Hmm.
Before I say something I'm going to regret, before I say something that I cannot take back, it's probably going to be in the best interest of my family to walk away. Take a break and come back to the situation. I think that's a number one thing. If you feel yourself getting out of control, walk away from it and then come back. Again, I'm going to talk about this throughout our time together today, but seeking community. And I know that that's really, really hard right now because we're social distancing. But we have to find ways to keep within community, because honestly, community keeps us sane a lot of times. And so these are the people that we call whenever we're angry, sad, or frustrated. So your friends, your family. We're FaceTiming with people. A lot of times, people who are in counseling, this is where you're going to reach out to that counselor again, and you're going to say, "Hey, do you do telehealth? Can I do a therapy session online, just to maintain some sort of contact with someone that can speak truth into you during this really weird time?" And so we're taking breaks whenever we're feeling frustrated. We're seeking community where we can, and friends, family, FaceTime, Zoom meetings. A lot of people are having parties. I have a friend that's in a, a book club, and the book club is still meeting every single week. On Friday, all the girls get together at nighttime after the kids go to bed, and they're all sitting down doing their normal thing on video chat. And so we have a lot of, this is a great time for this horrible thing to be happening, because we have lots of access to keeping up with our friends and our family members, but we have to seek that out.
Yeah.
Another thing that I am going to mention is apologize to your kids and your people that are living in your household when you mess up. Making amends is really important during this time, because we're all not okay. We're all going to say and do things that we probably regret, but figuring out a way that you can apologize to your kids when you do lose it is really important. I think we probably all know people in our lives that still at this point as adults do not apologize for the things they do. Those people I can't handle. I can't handle. We have to figure out a way that when we do lose it in front of the people that we love, we can apologize and ask for forgiveness.
Yeah.
We can't pour from an empty vessel. And so it's very important for us as parents to take care of our mental health so that we can care for other people.
I know the apology thing. I mean, that's tricky, you know, and I get that, because, you know, there are times that you get frustrated, and there are times that you know, some of that, and it's like you fly off the handle, but there's times even that I know for me, it feels righteous, you know, like,
Oh, yeah.
because you've been driving me crazy all day, and I have been patient, and I have had it, and now it's just gonna, like a shook up 2 liter that you just take the cap off, it's gonna
Yeah.
come out, you know. And so I know that's a big deal. And I have that, you know, we're working on some of this stuff here, you know, even with our own kids, because again, now we're able to see, you know, some of the tendencies, you know, when we sit down at parent teacher conferences and teachers try to explain to things about our kids, and we're like, what? No way, that couldn't be them. Well, now we're going, oh yeah, you know, even some of those things too, of having them figure out, hey, you need to own your mess. And when you
Yeah.
make a mistake, the first thing you need to say is, hey, I own this, I'm sorry.
Yep.
And what can I do to make it right? I
Mhm.
will say, as a parent, it is really hard. This is just me being honest. It's really hard
Mhm.
for me to do that sometimes with my 5-year-old or my 7-year-old, you
Yeah.
know, because it's like, well, I'm dad, I don't make mistakes, you know, what dad says, you know, like those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But if it's my expectation for them, then they need to see it modeled. And honestly, it needs to be their expectation of
Mhm.
me is to be able to do the same thing. But saying
Yep.
that is one thing, doing it is something is completely different.
It's really hard because it's a hit to your pride as a parent,
Sure.
because you do kind of feel like that you should have it all together. But the truth is we don't. And we say mean things to our kids. I'm not immune to it. I say mean things too. And so to be able to go to that kid and to tell them, I apologize, I shouldn't have said that. I was feeling frustrated and this is what I could have done instead. And so we have to figure out how to learn how to manage all the stuff inside of us so that it doesn't pour out to the
Yeah.
kids later,
Yeah.
because we're modeling to them and they're going to adopt some of those things. So do you want your kids to adopt some of that? More than likely the answer is no.
What are some things that you maybe would say, like, what do we not know about our kids right now as we're trying to grasp for or search for or find answers for ourselves? What do we not know about them?
Yeah. Some of the behavior changes that you're seeing in your kids at home is a direct result of kind of the stress and anxiety that they are internally experiencing. I know that whenever I work with kids who have experienced a grief or loss, sometimes the parents will be like, but they don't seem sad. They're not sad. They're not crying. They're not asking questions about the person who had passed away, but they're really mad. And so that's a mask that kids will often wear. So if your kid is irritable, not sleeping well, if there's weird changes in their appetite, it could be that they are experiencing worry, anxiety, and they have a lot of questions about coronavirus. There was a meme floating around social media. It was titled "Kids' Sadness About COVID-19 Might Look Like," and I agreed with a lot of these. So it could look like anger, resisting new order, tiredness, numbing out, displaced frustration, and boredom. During this time, we're just going to have an extra dose of patience for these kids and understanding, because they don't know how to express what they're feeling, and it comes out in just weird ways.
Yeah, kind of comes out sideways.
Oh
So
yeah.
when you say things like resisting the new order, was one thing, or numbing out or displaced frustration,
Yeah.
what might those things look like? Like, because I get the whole, like sometimes you can't, in this case, it's like you can't judge a book by its cover. My
Yeah.
kid, I don't know why my kid's so angry. Well, it's because they're worried about this, and this is just the way they're choosing to express that.
Right.
Well, but some of those things obviously are way more noticeable and apparent and easier to read than others.
Yeah.
When you talk about resisting like the new order or numbing out or displaced frustration, maybe give
Yeah.
us some examples of what that might look like.
Yeah, resistance to new order. I'm going to go back to our schedule. Sometimes kids, they buck at it. They don't want to do the new schedule. They want nothing to do with it. They don't like it. They don't like this new structure in their household. And so they're going to try it. So for us as parents to just be really consistent that this is what it's going to look like. When we're talking about creating and maintaining schedules, if you want to avoid resistance to it, make sure you're including the kid on creation of the schedule, because if they're a part of creating the schedule, they're going to buy in more to the schedule and adhere to it. Be flexible with it. If you're noticing that your kid is resisting one specific area a whole lot, I would have a conversation about it. Say, hey, I'm noticing this part is not working really well. What do you think we could do in order to make this work a little bit better? And so it may be you move whatever this is to a different part of the day, or you do it in a different way. So I think us as parents, we need to try to be a little bit more flexible if we're noticing that our kid is resisting something too much. But if they continually are resisting everything new that's going on in your household, it's just a clue that they're really struggling with something. And then just to ask a question about it. I would be very direct. I'm noticing that you are doing this. Would you like to talk about that? The numbing out, sometimes that can just look like they have no motivation. And you might notice numbing out more in a middle school or a high school kid, honestly, because they are just done with life, disappointment or whatever that's looking like this is not what they wanted with their life. And so they just kind of, I don't want to say disassociate, but they become less active in participating in your household.
Mm-hmm.
Displaced frustration, that can look like the littlest thing makes you really angry, or the littlest thing makes you frustrated. So if they spilled a cup of milk and they completely went berserk on you, that's displaced frustration, because it's something little that had a really big reaction. So that would be a clue. If very little things that didn't normally make your kid have a really big reaction is now getting a really huge reaction, that's a clue that they're really struggling with something right now.
So you said the way, like, if we find this, we're picking up on some of these things, these kind of, hey, this is a new, like, I'm noticing that they're a little more angry. I'm noticing that, there's way more pushback than normal, or they're, it is that they're just kind of glazed over and, zombie numbed out. How do we, like you'd mentioned, hey, I'm going to be real direct in asking these questions, but if we see these things, if we're noticing these things, what's the best way to approach that?
Yeah. A lot of families that I work with, I encourage having a family meeting. So if there's one thing specific that you're noticing that your kid is doing, you could sit down and just have a little meeting about it, where you have a problem. So whatever the identified problem is, you bring it to the family meeting and you say, hey, I'm really noticing that there's a lot of pushback on the schedule right now. I think that's really important for us. And so figuring out how to talk to them about it in a way that isn't mean and doesn't shame them. We want to make sure that we're taking shame and blame out of this, because we're all having a really difficult time right now. And so just to have a really direct conversation, and then offer suggestions for how that they could deal with it. If you notice that they're just becoming increasingly angry, or how they're reacting to you is super disrespectful, figuring out how you can give suggestions to them, and setting firm boundaries and rules in your household where if they continue to do that, this is what the consequence for that behavior is.
Hey, thanks for tuning in with us today. Again, don't forget about next week, next Tuesday, we're going to have part 2 of this conversation that, again, is going to focus in more on those of us who are kind of riding this thing out alone, or parents or families where we've got grown kids or older kids, or even dealing in some cases with extended family. How do we deal with the fact that maybe our kids aren't able to see their grandparents or things like that? How do we have those conversations? So part 2 is going to happen next Tuesday. So look forward to that. Subscribe to this, like this, do all the fun stuff, and we will continue telling more adventure stories.